Welcome to the show. We hope you have a blast. Thanks for making time for the Dealer Talk podcast. Another business leader, here's a penny for your thoughts. This ain't a regular conversation, baby. This that Dealer Talk. Yeah, this that Dealer Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dealer Talk podcast. This is your host, Herb Anderson. I have a very special guest today. Very excited for this conversation. So let's just jump right into it. Without further ado, Mr. Ian Nethercott. Did I say that correct, Ian?
Yeah, Ian Nethercott. It's a British name, so
there you go.
Not very common in North America.
Yeah, here's typically when you hear the applause, right? When so they make a little applause.
Yeah, Ian means John, if you didn't know. It's a really interesting John replacement. But Nethercott's a British name, so it's from England. Is part of my heritage. So
yeah, right on.
I'm related to most of them in North America.
Good. Dude, so hey man, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to kind of see where this conversation goes. We kick things off here at the Dealer Talk podcast with a recap. So tell us about you, man.
21 plus years in the auto industry, 10 years retail, mostly for Honda. Have a history in the industry in my family. My grandfather owned a bunch of dealerships. My dad and uncle worked in dealerships. My cousin works at a dealership outside of Toronto, a Hyundai store actually that he part owns. I myself got into retail mostly for Honda, but I've worked with dealers for a little over 10 years in various areas. But I worked retail myself, pretty much every job in a dealership. So salesperson, sales manager, a lease manager, internet manager. I've worked with F&I individuals, training them all over North America. I've worked in call centers, set those up and trained those up. I've worked with service departments. I've worked with a company that has tablets called Dealer Effects, training in that area. I've worked in the non-prime space, both on the digital side and also training people in that area. Currently work in the web space. I work for a company that has a revolutionary web platform called NavThat, which is changing the way websites are done for automotive. And I've also had the opportunity to really help people from coast to coast to coast all over North America get better at automotive. I mean, really, for me, it's about customer experience, improving, and also getting better than you were the day before. I mean, I got into the car industry really by accident because I felt the bar was just set so low. I'd been a career salesperson. I was like, okay, like this process for most people is not enjoyable. That's a great opportunity for someone who wants to make it enjoyable. And that's what made me very successful as a car salesperson. Was for me, it was all about customer experience. Like, yeah, I had to make a living, sure, but it really was about creating a better experience for that customer. And I'd say that's even more true today. And lately, over the last close to 2 years, I've done a show called the Auto Hub Show on Mondays at 11 o'clock East Coast on Zoom, now on LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live. And the reason for that show was to really help dealers get better and really help people working with dealers connect with dealerships, and also people in the industry just connect with other people to get better. Because to me, it's about really getting better at what you do in any way that you can. So that's really what I'm all about. I currently live in Vancouver, BC, but I'm from Toronto originally, and I spent 10 years living in the US. I work with dealers all over North America. So I'm pretty familiar with the landscape, no matter what country. And we even had guests on the show from as far away as Serbia, the country. Georgia, the country. And we also have had people on the show from Italy and from a small island off the coast of Spain called Majorca, I think it's called. We also had a gentleman from Norway on from his boat, Norway or Sweden, I think he's from. And we had one of our guests who is a Canadian, but he happens to have a house in Greece. So he did the show on his iPad from his house in Athens. So the international scale of things is quite interesting.
Yeah. How cool is it, man, that we have the technology today to be able to, first of all, do this kind of these kinds of shows and these kinds of, to have these kinds of platforms to promote and help others, like you said, grow and expand within the automotive industry. And then not only that, but take it international and connect with other folks and kind of get their perspective on things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny. Years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I did a podcast with a buddy of mine. It was on social media. He used to do this every 2 weeks. We do these podcasts in the back of a bar. And we'd always do 2 or 3 back to back. So we do a first one, and then we take a break and do a second recording, and we take a break and do a third recording. And then he put these out over a month. And the funniest thing about it was, as the shows progressed, people got more and more intoxicated. So the topics went more and more off the rails. And because it was on social media anyway, it got me in a little bit of trouble. I was working at a dealership at the time, but it was a lot of fun. And I think that's what's interesting, is you've seen sort of the convergence from audio podcasts to video podcasts to streaming to all the above. And I think what's the most interesting, at least for me, is that people prefer, in some cases, to listen to it in an audio format, whether it be Clubhouse or other. Some people want to watch it on video, but some people will stream it. But the options today to make a show that's essentially like a television show with minimal equipment and, I guess, limited skill set is impressive, but it can be global. And I think that's something that, I've never would have connected with a lot of these people globally at the scale I have without the presence of a show on a regular basis. And I think that's the key thing, is you need to be doing it consistently, whether it's once a month, once every 2 months, once a week. That's really what it comes down to. And you learn as you go. I think the mistake a lot of people make is they go, hey, I have to be an expert on video editing and on promotion and on audio and on streaming and on producing content and lead-ins and guest interviews and finding time. No, you just need to start somewhere.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that, I just, from my own personal experience, I remember when we first started this deal, and I had a book that was Podcast for Dummies, and just kind of connected that way. Anchor was like the platform to just kind of push or syndicate to all the different wherever people listen to podcasts, and just bought a couple mics and kind of went from there. And it's just progressed. You get better at it just by doing it. You know what I mean? So having just starting is everything.
Yeah, I mean, you look at streaming, and this is something I added recently. Initially, I was doing Zoom, and then I used Buzzsprout, so I was syndicating the podcast version, and YouTube, of course. And then I started doing streaming, and I started with LinkedIn Live. The reason is I've been trying to get on LinkedIn Live for a couple of years, so I finally got worthy for LinkedIn Live. So then I had to figure out a new piece of software, which is StreamYard, which works like Buzzsprout for podcasts. But there's a really cool piece of software for the Macintosh called Loopback. And if you're familiar with the old school switching boards where you had inputs and outputs and you could turn audio on and off, those kind of things back in the day, it's basically a digital version of that, which is actually kind of interesting, especially since it costs $100. And I don't even know if you can get a switching board for that. But the thing that's crazy is, on top of all this different technology, which is somewhat complicated, what you can do with it is probably more powerful than stuff, say, 20 years ago TV stations were using. Like, it's amazing how fast this stuff has moved forward. Like, when you look at StreamYard, for example, I mean, you can syndicate, I think, up to 6 different streams with that, which is like, I mean, and today they announced you can do it with Teams. So if you have a co-host, you can be streaming together in different locations. I mean, it was like the pace of acceleration here is crazy. It just is. It's just going fast.
Yeah, and I mean, to tie it to the car business, right? Like, car dealers and car salespeople and service people, and we all have access to these platforms, to this technology, and it's just up to the creativity of each individual to kind of showcase whether it be their personality or their salesmanship or their interest to help people in the car business, or maybe their interest in other areas that connects you with like-minded individuals that know that you also happen to sell cars, and maybe you can, it's just, there's all kinds of different avenues to take this deal and utilize it. I think about, like, what would we have done 20 years ago to put something like this together, and how costly it would be, and all these different things. And now, man, you can just kind of play and go. So
yeah, I mean, there's a guy we've had on our show. His name is George Saraglou. He's a Greek guy in Toronto. he does these crazy videos. I don't know how he got approval from his dealer principal or Toyota to do these things. But he does these crazy videos. I mean, I was doing social media 15 years ago at a dealership and got myself into some trouble for it. But, you know, realistically, we did have a show called Young Guns versus Old Dogs, where we had a bunch of guys who do this at scale. You know, he does it really amateurish, but it works for him. And it works for the dealership, and people know him because he does this on a regular basis. And, you know, there was other people on the show that do it from different, you know, different brands, different locations. And we've had other shows about that, but a lot of people don't do it because they're scared.
Yeah.
They're just not sure what people are going to react. I mean, he's had Toyota corporate pay him to come, you know, to their head office and teach their marketing people what to do. And he's just doing this really, you know, single take videos with crazy, you know, I mean, the stuff that I wouldn't have done, but it works for him, right? So it's a question of, you know, taking the technology and broadcasting what you do, and obviously getting approval from the dealer principal or the brand. But I think that dealerships and manufacturers aren't doing this enough. I think, you know, with brands like Tesla who spend $0 on advertising.
I know, right?
You know, I mean, surely you can do the same thing for minimal money. I mean, even a podcast or a vlog or a stream, I mean, really you need very minimal equipment to do it properly. And really it's just a question of having a passion for it and having a love for it. It's not as difficult as it might seem. But, you know, there's obviously examples of people that have done it better than others. But at the end of the day, it's putting in the effort, really.
Yeah. And you get better too, man. So that's the other thing. Like, you may start, and I'm not going to say it's going to be awesome. Maybe it does suck in the beginning. But, you know, if you're consistent with it, the cool thing is that you get a little bit more comfortable, and, you know, ideas start to flow a little bit easier, and you know, it just becomes more natural, and then it gets progressively better. So, and I also think that the audience, or your potential audience, is very forgiving as well in the beginning, you know, because like I said, I listened to the first couple of episodes that we did, maybe the whole first season, and it sounds like horrible, man. You can hear the breathing into the mic, and it's just like I'd be like, man, there's no way I would sit for 40 minutes or for an hour to listen to an episode. I don't care who's the guest, you know. So yeah, and now we're 6 seasons into it. So
I mean, I've learned a lot in format. I've learned a lot from trying stuff. I've learned a lot from actually some of our best ideas come from guests on the show for what episodes to do, because, you know, we have let's just say 10 to 12 major topics that we touch on a lot. But you could also focus, much like Ted Ings has done with the roundtable, on just one area. Mm-hmm. So it's not to say that you have to do everything. We opt to do a lot of things just because we want to keep it interesting for us. But also it's the personalities. Like Jeff is a different personality than I am. Brandon and Rick, who started the show, are totally different people than we are. So that's part of it. But also some guests are much more dynamic than others. So some guests take it in a different direction. The most interesting shows we tend to do have a lot of guests. So we did one on EVs where we had, I think, about 7 different guests. We did the one on the show about shows where we had about 7 guests on it. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's great to have one guest. I mean, we had this gentleman from Italy who basically carried a whole show by himself. And he was talking about stuff that you don't hear about much here because he happens to live in Italy. So he has some opinions on the European car market that in North America we would just not really be exposed to. So that was interesting as well. But the topic that we've been really hammering for a long time, which we have yet to get the traction, I don't know why, is on human resources in automotive. We feel it's a big issue because the turnover is so high, but getting any dealer to watch it or any manager to watch it is very challenging. I mean, the HR people are passionate, but I feel for them because the dealer's like,
yeah, right. Oh, we just expect it, man.
Well, it's funny because you hear numbers like 90% leave the business and you'd think there'd be alarm bells going off, but I mean, I feel for the HR people in the business because the dealers just don't care. They really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, wow, no matter which angle I've taken to look at it. And I also had one other example, which was kind of interesting. One of the first shows we did on women in automotive, I had all kinds of people telling me, oh, don't do it. It's a bad topic. Nobody wants to hear about it. It's not a good idea. And not only have we done a series of these shows, they're some of our best listened to shows, not only by women, but by men. But what surprised me the most was just how much negativity when we did the first one. People were so like against the idea, which is kind of interesting looking back at it now. So, have fun with it. That's the way I look at it. And also try to have a structure. The other thing we learned when I first took over the show, we would ask each guest a series of questions. And then we go to the next guest and we ask them a series of questions. And then we go to the next guest and ask a series of questions. What we learned was it was much better to have a round table. It's much better to have a real structured front end to the show, which we do now with a short video, and we have some other things that we do. But also, if you ask one guest and the next guest and the next guest, it's a much better flow for everybody, and the guests are much more engaged. The other thing that I would like to see more of, and we have at points seen more and less of it, is people asking questions. Like, it's amazing to me how different questions come up that I wouldn't have thought of from audience members.
Let's talk about that, man, because I agree that one is a tough one, and I owe an apology to a lot of folks, because in the beginning we asked for questions and we got a ton of questions.
Yeah,
especially after season 3. And I was trying hard, man, to incorporate that into the format, but it's just, I didn't, I haven't found a way to do it, because I feel like if you answer some questions and not all questions, then you're kind of leaving some people hanging. Some questions just to be honest, were just not good questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then what, like, how do you pick and choose the ones? Like, I feel like we would be super biased here because depending on the situation, you know what I mean? And what's going on in the market, and then you'd leave people hanging, and it's like, how do you really address that?
Well, there's a couple of things you got to look at. Number one, the show I do is a live show. So we've got to filter questions, because we refuse to ask inappropriate questions. So if people pose that, we just don't ask. And we have had situations. One of the first shows ever on the Auto Hub show back in the early days, someone in the audience was trying to pitch something instead of asking questions. And we're like, dude, like, no.
What are you doing, man?
You had like a whiteboard behind him with like, I don't know. It was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, so that was another one that was kind of funny. But the other thing is, you'll have people, and this isn't in sincerity to the people that are the speakers on the show. We'll tell them, listen, if there's a question that we don't feel comfortable with, we're not going to ask it. Our job is not to put this person against that person. That's not what we do, because it doesn't help anybody, and also it's going to impact people wanting to be on the show. Much like they do on, talk shows, is they put people in bad situations to see what happens. I mean, we refuse to do that.
Right.
But also in some cases, and most of our questions come from a chat box during the show right now on Zoom, but we're also starting to, as we stream, we'll probably start getting questions from these other platforms, Facebook and LinkedIn, which is a little hard to manage from a strictly technological point of view. We try to just ask the questions that make sense. And in our case, we can usually ask all of them. Now, some guests won't want to answer them for whatever reason. But also, very rarely will we see someone ask them live on video, but that does happen, because we do have live people that are watching the show that are in the audience that can't ask questions. Those tend to be people that are regular listeners. So the people that tend to be better askers of questions, for example, will be the people that are regular listeners that are comfortable with the format and they already know kind of the ground rules. Where it gets a little bit difficult is when you have inappropriate questions, or to your point, just not really good questions. Like, I'd love to ask that question, dude, but like that's not really relevant.
Right. Exactly.
In all honesty, like, it's just not a good question. Right.
Yeah.
And most people understand that. I mean, I guess you're going to get people that, get upset. I mean, much like if you have a show where you have a politician on and they ask a question and it's clear that the news person isn't asking those questions because they don't want to put them in a spot, right? But we don't do it for that reason. We do it just because like we don't see it adding any value, right?
Right.
Well,
And that's the thing. Like, what people don't realize, I think, when they listen to these shows is that you got a certain amount of time. I mean, this isn't the Joe Rogan experience, right? You're not going to sit here and talk for 4 hours. Like, you know what I mean? You have a certain amount of minutes to kind of get to the point of that episode or what you're trying to cover. And you gotta squeeze in all that information into 40 minutes or so. So if you don't do it right, you miss sharing that valuable information with the audience, which is, and I've done shows like that too, that I'm done with it. And then I re-listen to the episode or whatever. And I'm like, man, I mean, there was at least 2 or 3 other questions or other points that we should have made in that episode. And we didn't get to it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's hard to get a lot of stuff covered with multiple guests in a limited time frame. Like that's why I try to shoot for that 3 to 5 speakers or 3 to 5 guest speakers in a show. That tends to be the sweet spot, 2 to 3, 3 to 5. Whenever you get into the 7 or more, it tends to cut down on the content. And then you do have cases where you'll have one speaker that just takes over the show.
Yeah.
Like a really strong speaker. I think it was the gentleman from Carnow. Was it Tim Cox? His dad was a preacher, I think. And man, that guy can speak. Like, I mean, he just takes over this. You ask him a question, you're just kind of like,
yeah.
It's kind of like listening to Brian Benstock or Tim Long's another one that's really, I also do a show called Level Up sometimes. We do it usually on Zoom. It's a small group of people, but that show is really good too because it's really structured based on leadership of the group, where he's got an agenda, right?
Yeah,
and he's pushing that, and that's also true with everything Used Cars on Fridays too. Is it's like very much that's an agenda, and Ben Stock can speak for an hour by himself. Doesn't even have to be.
He's a man. I've been trying to get him on the show for a minute. Like he'd be a great guest to talk to as well.
I know him. I mean, he's a very good guy. He's just busy, but yeah, I mean, his show on Saturday mornings on Clubhouse. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
It's a massive amount of value in an hour. It's just really early for me.
Yeah.
So I don't hit it up every week, but it's if he's got a structure, he can do an hour by himself, and it sounds like it's all prepared. I don't know how much it is, but he's just can command that kind of audience, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. So what's going on, man? What's what are you focusing on these days? How are things going?
Lots of focus on technology. We did a show this week on what are you doing with your freaking software? And the reason is, dealers go and they go to an NADA or they go to whatever show, Digital Dealers in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and they buy whatever the bongle is this week, right. Software, hardware, whatever. And then, a year later, like, what are you doing with that? Oh, I don't know. But you bought it to do this. So the reason we had the show is we're asked in a lot of cases on shows and even in between shows by people, okay, like, is digital retail good? Are websites good? Is this software good? What about used cars? What about operations? What about F&I? What about training? And, we thought we should have a show where we just talked about software. So we had a wide array of guests on the show to really talk about, how do you get your team to use software at scale and what's happening in software? Because when I was a digital dealer, there was a lot of AI, a lot of other things. The pace is changing, but the question is, what do you do as a dealer to make the right purchases and make sure that those purchases get put in place to move the dealership forward? Because we all know less and less people are coming into dealerships and more people are doing more online, which is a little bit of a challenge for some of the older car salespeople who want to really do business belly to belly. They don't really want to do it on Instagram or on Facebook or on texting or even anything but a phone or in person. So it's that evolution of car selling versus 20 years ago when everything was done on a long form piece of paper,
sure.
Is accelerating. But there's also a lot of pushback from the dealers saying, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a digital retail solution if it isn't going to do anything for me.
Now more than ever, businesses need more efficient sales. That's why thousands of dealerships trust Foureyes to help with things like automated inventory email updates and ensuring all of your leads get into the CRM. To try Foureyes for free, visit foureyes.io/dealertalk. That's foureyes.io/dealertalk.
And in 2021, they figure out they got it all figured out. They don't need to buy anything. They figure, okay, well, people are going to come in and buy it and pay too much anyway. So I'm just not going to change anything. Like there was a sales trainer that I know, he was on LinkedIn today saying, oh, you should get into car sales because you'll make $300,000 to $700,000 a year right now. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, like I just didn't agree with that. I was like, well,
no, neither do I.
Right? But what are you setting these people up to do? You bring them in. I mean, and I think David Long was talking about this on one of our shows recently. He said, you get this guy who used to work at Wendy's who's now making $250,000 a year selling cars, and then next year he's making $50,000 because suddenly there's tons of cars, and then
everything's when it levels up. I was talking to Ali Rita recently, and that's exactly one of the things that it's like there's people that have come into the car business during this whole situation that don't know what a 500 to 600 gross is, right?
Yeah.
So when those deals come back, they're going to be like, oh, shit.
So lots of discussion about pay plans. We did a show, Does Your Pay Plan Suck a while ago, which people really liked. We do some fun shows. So we have one about performance cars, which was a lot of fun, where we had Sarah from Porsche in LA. And we had Steve Dinan's shop on to talk about, if you got too much money and then you want to throw more money on top of your too much money to make your car go faster, here's what you do, kind of thing. So we threw that in. We did have a show about, what made you a car fanatic. So we do those shows as well. We try to keep it light, but we try to add a lot of value. I mean, I think the biggest challenge dealers have is that they're dealing with the change. They're dealing with the customers that are changing. They're trying to figure out what to do, but they also don't know what necessarily is the right thing to do. Like why I bring up that pay plan piece is a lot of what I'd say the innovators are, the troublemakers are in the industry that are really thinking ahead. They're already thinking like, I've got to set that salesman up not to quit when his pay drops in half. I got to teach him how not to spend like he's going to make $500,000 a year next year when he's only going to make 100, right? So I've got to get that person educated into that. You've got to still go through the steps, right? Mm-hmm. You still got to take care of that customer. You can't charge them $40,000 more for an Escalade this year and then expect them to be happy in 2 years when they come back and they're underwater. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on right now. And used cars are something we've done a number of shows on as well, and we're doing one next week. But used cars, to me, are where all the money's going to be for the next 18 to 24 months. I mean, there's just not going to be new inventory. And that's another thing that's been interesting is trying to get manufacturers on the show. So we did a show about electric cars a while ago, and we got some people from Hyundai to come on and talk about electric cars. But then we wanted to do a show on the chip shortage, which we did. We talked to every manufacturer. Nobody would want to come on.
Nobody wants to talk about that, right?
Like, we're not coming on. We're not talking about chips. We're not saying anything. And it was really kind of funny because it was like whenever you get a hard topic, getting a manufacturer to show up and say anything is impossible,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this one is a weird one. I don't think they even now, I think it'd be hard to get them on.
If you need a connection to manufacturer, let me know. I've had them on shows before. The other problem I find.
Well, no, I mean, yes, so do I. But I mean, I'm just saying to talk about that specific topic right now. I still feel like it's like I was going to ask you. You mentioned right now 18 to 24 months, and my ear just kind of perked up because I'm like, dude, do you really think it's going to take that much longer?
Yep. Wow. Maybe longer, but think about it this way. A good buddy of mine, he did a video. He's actually a salesman, but he did a video to demystify this for people because, the OEMs are saying, yeah, it's all good. Don't worry. Just take orders. They'll be fine. They show up at his dealership. Oh, yeah, no problem. You talk to dealers. Oh, yeah, the Chrysler rep says, we're going to have all the trucks in 3 months. well, how many you got now? Oh, we got about 5. I'm like, oh, okay. How many you normally have? 200. Oh, okay. So that's going to be fixed. Okay.
Whoa.
But what he said was as follows. He goes, the average chip count in a car today is 1,000.
Oh,
So
that's true.
if you don't have chips, and let's just say you can make more chips, which I think they will be able to eventually. But it's what they're going to do is they're going to produce the cars that they have the chips to make. So they're going to make different cars. But the thing that really struck out for me, and he did a quick video, which I'm happy to send you, you can share it, but his name is Marco. Marco Manuetto, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He works in a Mercedes store, actually. He used to work at an Audi store, I think. And he said, listen, what percentage of the global chips are put into cars? Of the total supply of chips in the world, what percentage do cars make up?
No clue here.
10%.
What?
Yep. What percentage of chips does Apple consume?
If that's 10, 40%?
You're close, 30%. So basically what happened was, and this is, the manufacturers aren't going to tell you this, the rep's not going to tell you this, people make chips probably won't tell you this, you can look it up yourself online. Basically what happened at the beginning of the pandemic is people went, people aren't going to buy cars, they're going to be in their house, we don't need as many chips, let's talk to procurement, let's cut down the amount of chips we're buying. Because we're not going to make as many cars, not going to be as many sales. We got to sort of get ahead of this, right? Because you got to remember back in 2007, I think there was that tsunami in Japan that wiped out a couple of these chip plants.
Right.
So now the people that make chips, and this is a highly specialized production to make chips for cars anyway. It's multi-billion-dollar plants, and the time to make them is huge. Basically, they said, okay, well, the car guys don't want the chips anymore, and Apple wants them, so we're going to change production to something Apple. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So then the car people started getting freaked out because people wanted cars. They didn't expect that. So now they're trying to ramp chips back up, but now they don't have the same amount of production capacity. So it's going to take time for that to happen. And on top of it, you've got another problem, which is actually an opportunity if you look at it. But all the manufacturers then figured out something else, as did the dealers. Why am I stocking 300 cars when I can just order cars that I need?
Right. Yeah.
And that saves me on my flooring costs. It saves me on my inventory. It saves me on days in stock. It's kind of the Toyota model or the Tesla model. And some of the manufacturers have already embraced that, Ford being one, but other ones I'm sure are doing the same thing.
Well, that's the whole concept of JIT, right? Just-in-time manufacturing.
Yeah. I mean, Kaizen is a great example of that. But even with Toyota, if I basically only built the cars I had sold, that's a good thing for everybody. Now, whether that will last and we'll end up eventually going back to I got 300 cars in stock, so let's blow them all out because I'm getting 300 more next month. I don't know. But the other thing that dealers have realized, and so is the manufacturer, is why am I discounting cars or incentivizing discounts when I don't have any?
Well, that's the thing. Like now demand and supply kick in at their normal levels. And then, like the demand is there, the supply is, well, right now it's low, but if we get to that model of ordering, then the supply is going to be, that supply would be right where it needs to be, and we can all make more money.
And the manufacturer wants that too. They don't want to incentivize. They don't want to give you money to blow out a car. They don't want to do that.
But do they? And here's my question for you. Like I've had this conversation on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Do you think that the manufacturers, don't you think that for them the end objective is to produce, right? Isn't that going to be like push that inventory out, or do you think that this has kind of readjusted the way that they look at their production, and therefore we're gonna progressively go into that ordering model? I hope we do, man. I really do, because if there's a big takeaway from this, because what's happening in the market right now, it's artificial. Isn't going to last. But if we can go to that production model, I think that it would be advantageous for everybody.
Well, as part of my MBA, I took an operations class, and you study all kinds of different operations: airport security, restaurant business, this, that, manufacturing. So one of them was they compared General Motors to Toyota. And they were really comparing, like how many days of parts do you have? How much inventory is on the ground? What's the manufacturing process? What's the production scaling? how much, how quick can you ship production? And the thing that was stark, and this study was from, I think, the 80s, maybe late 80s, early 90s, but they were talking about Kaizen, which is Toyota's way of doing everything, versus General Motors, which is just, we'll build all this shit and we'll hope people buy it. If we don't, we'll force them to buy it. And if they still don't want to buy it, we'll send it to the dealer and then we'll give them money to get rid of it. Basically, it's their angle, right? But the thing that struck me as surprising when I looked through this study and when I studied this, was, being a car person, was just the massive amount of difference in revenue from Toyota to General Motors. And the reason was Toyota wasn't building stuff hoping people would buy it even then. They looked at what the orders were that the dealers wanted, and they were matching production as much as possible to that. And it made them vastly more profitable as a manufacturer because they didn't have the inventory of parts. They weren't building stuff people didn't want. They didn't have to put incentives on it to blow it out. Right. So essentially, it was a superior model. Now, I think what's happened because of the pandemic is these other manufacturers who were doing it the old school way, and probably have been since back in the day, are starting to figure out, well, not only am I happier as a manufacturer not to have all this stuff,
right?
My dealers are happier and everybody makes more money. So I think that's where it's going to crystallize. Now, does that mean it's going to be perfect? I don't think so.
No, of course not.
But I think also the way people buy cars today and the amount of cars people are going to buy generationally is probably going to change anyway. So it's about time for them to say, okay, what are we building? But not just from a cost point of view. If I'm only building the cars people want, I'm not building extra cars I don't need to build, which, by the way, I don't make money on anyway, as much money, because I have to then blow them out. So historically, I think the manufacturers have just said, okay, I'm going to build a Cadillac, or I'm going to build a Chev. Let's build 20 different variations on the Chev model. We don't know what people want anyway, but we'll build 20, and then, if they don't buy it, we'll figure out some way to get rid of it.
Worry about it later, man. Worry about it later.
And then you look at the Tesla model or the Lucid model or the Rivian model. Okay, well, we're only going to build the cars that we actually got a deposit on that someone wants. So we're not going to build 20 variations. We're going to build 3. Which, by the way, is pretty much what Toyota has done for a long time.
Right.
But I would even argue the Japanese have moved over the last 10 years more to that American model, American domestic manufacturing model, where they have too many variations. You don't need all these models. Like, try selling a General Motors pickup or a Chrysler pickup. Just the variations, or a Ford commercial vehicle. The variations that they make for no reason at all. Like, why do I need all these variations if people don't want it? So, well, I think there's some distinct advantages to that model.
And that's a great point too, because what ends up happening for the customers is they oftentimes end up getting either less than what they wanted or more than what they wanted on their car. And the ordering model allows them to get exactly what they want. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think
when you combine that with chips, I can't make as much cars anymore anyway, because I don't have the chips to do it. So what I want to do is then only build the cars that I actually have an order for, that I have chips to make.
Right.
Right. So instead of building 20 basic pickups and hoping someone wants of less chips, I can build 5 luxury pickups where I make more money that people actually order.
Yeah.
So that's the other reason why I think 18 to 24 months, if they stick with the model they've had, but if they can change that model, they might be able to make the inventory show up faster. And by the time this all happens, customers are going to be conditioned to ordering cars anyway.
Exactly.
And because they're going to be coming in and showing up. Do you have one? No, it's 3 months. Okay, well, what do you want? Since you're ordering it anyway. I mean, Ferrari and Rolls have done this for a long time.
Yeah, get exactly what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I want it in pink with the green hood. Sure, that's fine. Whatever you want, man. Like, we can build that.
Right.
And I think it'll also make the plants more effective because you'll actually be able to figure out what to build at what plant based on where you're sending that vehicle. I mean, not based strictly on government incentives, I would guess. But I mean, I think, that's part of it too, is if I'm Mazda, for example, and I'm building all my cars in Japan, before I throw them on a boat to go across the ocean, I probably want to make sure I have the right cars on there. Right?
Yeah. I mean, the efficiencies that this would accelerate, I mean, man, it would be great. Not to mention that it plays also into the future, right? And the ability to hopefully efficiently transact your entire purchase remotely.
Well,
right?
also engine choice. So let's just talk a little bit about EVs, even though I think EVs are kind of interesting. I did a post on EVs on LinkedIn, and the results I got were pretty funny. I think almost 65% said it was about money. It wasn't about the planet, which I thought was kind of funny. Because I put, is it profit, or is it just a smoke? Is it saving the planet, or is it just smoke screen for profit? I think was the poll. And almost 65% said, yeah, it's all about profit, dude. It has nothing to do with the planet, which I thought was funny. But when you think about engine choice over the next 10 years, let's just say, for example, A, I want to build a car that a customer wants. B, I want to build a car based on the chips I have. C, I want to have engine options. You're going to eventually have a modular car anyway. So did you want a hybrid? Did you want gas? Did you want hydrogen? Did you want electric? It makes a lot of sense for the manufacturers to start to figure that out, especially if they got a lower profit margin on electric cars because of the service model than they did with the ICE cars. And I know they do have that problem, but they're going to be forced to do it anyway because the politicians think they can change everything, which who knows if they can. But that's another whole area where I think it makes sense. But at the end of the day, the car retail model is changing. The way people buy cars is changing. If you see what Hertz is doing with Tesla recently, they're going to eventually turn the lease model into an MRR model, much like a cell phone. And you've got to have the ability to be flexible as a manufacturer in price point, in what you're building, and how you're building it, and how you're retailing it. And I think Kaizen from Toyota has already been proven that they're probably the most flexible manufacturer of automobiles on planet Earth. I mean, I know Tesla seems to think he can build it better than anyone, but I'd put the Japanese and the Germans up against them all day long, and they'll beat them. It's just a question of when, because they're arguably better manufacturers at scale. They've done it for years. They just change what they're building. And I know Toyota is going to bring the heat hard.
Well, I mean, you can't argue with results, man. I mean, it's just, it kind of is what it is. But so okay, I buy into that, man. Like I really hope that's my hope for the automotive industry. I really hope that happens because I think that's going to leave more money in the pockets of the people in this industry, which is, it would be great for everybody. But what about the impacts to the retail model? I mean, fewer cars means potentially fewer people, potentially the ability to maybe condense positions or fuse them rather, maybe a end-to-end salesperson model, something to that effect. Do you think that's not too far out of the realm of possibility?
Well, first of all, I don't think you're going to need as much staff. I mean, I think that's one of the many things dealers recognized through the pandemic. The first thing they did was they cut staff by 75% because they were panicked. They were like, oh, shit, no one's going to buy anything. We got all this staff. We got all this inventory. What are we going to do? And then they panicked like they do. And they laid off 75% of their staff. And I remember this because we had shows about rehiring. We did one, I think it was called rehiring or restaffing. And dealers on the show are like, well, what does that mean? It's like, okay, so I had 10 salesmen or I had 30 salesmen. Now I have 5. So of the 25 I let go, which of those would you rehire if given a choice? He goes, what do you mean? I go, well, clearly you didn't need them. And clearly some of them weren't very good. Right. So if you were a betting man and you were going to hire some back and retrain them, I'm assuming, how many and which ones? He said, that's a great question. I said, yeah, exactly. So the next question is, okay, I've got 3 sales managers, I got a general manager, I got 5 F&I people. I noticed that I could get by with 2 F&I people and 2 managers and maybe 5 to 10 salesmen when I had 30. What's going to happen is they're going to start looking at the math. They're going to say, okay, my employee cost outside of my fixed operations costs, my land costs and my parts and inventory costs are my highest cost, right? That the variable cost for people is high. Yeah. How many do I need? And more importantly, how many do I need to do the task that could be done by one person? Do I need 3, right? So F&I is the one that comes to mind. Sales manager is another one. If I entrust that salesperson to negotiate a deal online or over the phone or over whatever, and also pre-sell F&I, and maybe I need a clerk. Maybe I don't need an F&I person. With digital retail, maybe I don't need an F&I person. Right. I know Ben Stock's been talking about this for years, about having a clerk. But it's really going to come down to less staff to do the same thing. But the key piece that I think everyone's forgetting, and this is a topic I've been talking about for a long time, that customer experience is important from first point of contact, whether it be a phone or whether it be a phone like this, or whether it be the internet, is imperative because there's no extra customers. So what we had, I guess, before electric cars is we had 12 to 18 manufacturers. And now we're going to have probably 5 to 10 electric manufacturers join the fray. So we're going to have 20. Some of them are going to make it, some of them aren't. And then some of the traditional manufacturers will do electric at scale and they'll do well, some won't. But at the end of the day, there's a finite amount of buyers. So the first thing that every manufacturer needs to focus on, and this includes dealers, you've got to hold on to all your customers because there's a finite amount. You're going to lose some to Tesla. You're going to lose some to Rivian. You may lose some to Lucid. But what are you doing to maintain your existing customers? And how many touch points does that take to do that? From initial sale to service to repeat business. And what the dealers that are really forward thinking, or in my opinion, the dealers that are ahead of the curve are doing, Benstock being one, there's others, is they're saying, listen, we need to maintain that customer base and then figure out how to sell them another car.
Right.
The retention piece is where really it's going to, if I was going to de-staff my sales side, what I'd want to do is upstaff my retention side. Whether that be BDC or service or follow-up or after sales or whatever it might be. That's where it has to happen. And it has to happen no matter where the customer are. So if the customer's on the website, it has to happen. If the customer's touching a call center, or it's after hours, or it's service, that customer service level's got to be great all the way around. Yeah, and it's not perfect at Tesla, and it certainly won't be at Lucid, and it won't be at Rivian, and it won't be at Carvana, and it won't be at AutoMax or CarMax. It won't be at any of these. It won't be at any of these dealers. But you have to focus on that, because that's going to be the secret to continuing. Because that millennial or younger doesn't care about the car the way that Gen X and older does. They're not car driven. They're service driven, or I want it right now driven. I mean, right. When I look at Tesla, I see Tesla as this with a battery.
Yeah.
I mean, well, are okay looking, in my opinion. They're fast, in my opinion. Are they the best built thing out there? No. Are they really electric car? No. So they have that kind of feel that I like? Not really. But that customer doesn't care. They want that instant gratification. Mm-hmm. They want that ability to interact with like a phone with a screen and all this stuff. They want that service model that's around their life. They want ownership on their terms. They want different things. And that's true whether it's staff in your dealership or whether it's the customers. That Gen X and older, that'd be me, isn't going to be here forever. So that millennial and younger is the future. Right. You need to gear your staff around that customer and provide that experience, whether it be online, offline, in-store. And that's going to mean smaller dealerships, I think, with a better experience, a lot more remote service. It's going to mean taking better care of the customer and making sure that you're retaining that customer, not 20%, but 70, 80%. And those customers you're going to lose to that dealer who has inventory right now or a better experience, or maybe not even a better car, but that person just treated them better. I mean, if an Escalade, could they buy something else? Yeah.
I like a couple of things you said there. I want to unpack them, like the phone thing. Like, there's no question to me that the customers are going to own their car via their phone, yep. Right? Their keys are going to be in the phone. Doing everything in some sort of app format is going to definitely be like, you'll be able to control everything via that phone. So my question is, which I've been kind of pushing with the stores that I consult with, is like, do you have an app? Are you thinking about building some sort of app for your dealership? And more importantly, are you building enough value in that app for customers to download it and use it? Because it's going to, in my opinion, like that's going to be something that it's going to be part of the future, and either you're going to build one and start now, or you're going to have to buy it from somebody at some point in the near future. And then to the personalization point, I totally agree with that. First 20 years of the internet, like I mentioned this on an episode the other day. I'm 39 years old. I've been in the car business 22 years.
Yeah.
When I first started, I remember the dealership that I was working at talking about the website and, debating whether they were going to put inventory on that site. And my thought now is like, dude, you wouldn't even dream about running a dealership without a website.
Yeah.
And so if those first 20 years was standardizing this thing, the next 20 years is personalization. And so your website needs to have some sort of authorization portal where people are signing up and you're giving them that personalized experience based on where they are in the ownership journey. We talk a lot about the purchasing journey, but we don't talk nearly enough about the ownership journey. And the mean year isn't going down. If anything, is going up. So those customers are owning cars for longer periods of time. They have these moments of impact during their ownership journey. And we do a terrible job at communicating that and connecting with them at those precise moments with the right message, with the right time that builds that loyalty, that builds that recurring business with that potential owner of our brand. And more importantly, what am I trying to say? That have said yes to us basically by servicing and purchasing at our particular dealership. So I love that you mentioned that you kind of talked about those 2 points, because I think that that's definitely kind of, it's in the evolution roadmap, no question.
Yeah, well, 60 to 80% of customers only look at your dealership website with this.
Yeah.
Vast majority of dealers, and I'm not beating up on any web providers because that's not the point, are using technology that was designed 20 years ago for daddy bloggers called WordPress. WordPress is not state-of-the-art, guys. I mean, that's old stuff that doesn't work well on phones, even with some of the better providers out there. The customer today doesn't care that you don't understand that. They're just going to go to the website that works well, whether it be an app or website. It's got to work on this. The next thing, and this drives me nuts on a daily basis. What if I use this, which most people don't, but let's say I use it as a phone and I actually call your dealership from your website, from an app, whatever. Would you care to call 20 dealerships and try and get a person? I mean, between the antiquated push 1 for this, press 6 for that, press 3 for this, I've seen ones that have 3 different menus. Like are you a new customer or existing? Okay, I'm existing. And then press 1 for used cars, press 2 for new cars, press 3 if you have a problem with your car, press 4, press 8. Okay, we're the people, dude.
Right. And then
what do you do? And then they hang up on you anyway.
And it goes to a voice message and you're like, what? You want me to leave a message?
Yeah. Like, so number 1, have an app or a website that works well on a phone. Number 2, the best dealerships that I've talked to, and I talk to thousands a month all over North America and sometimes internationally, but North America, hire a receptionist or a call center or outsource if you have to, so that when someone calls a dealership, it says, hello, this is XYZ. How can I help you? Yeah. A person needs to be the first step. And even if that costs money, it doesn't matter, because that person, that personalized service versus I'm calling the IRS 1 for this, 6 for that, 24 for this. And I've even had this happen twice where it's like I answer it once and then it goes through another thing and it says, oh, and then it asks me the same question. Or it asks me a question, I push a number and it doesn't work, or it hangs up on me or whatever. At the end of the day, that service, you can't put a price on it. It's that important. I know they're trying to screen calls and move into different places and try and make it better, whatever. But the reality is the customer service piece is what it comes down to. I mean, when you call Apple Computer and they have a voice assistant that helps, but essentially you get through to a person within a very short period of time. And that's what needs to happen. If you want to retain customers, if you want to get new customers, the lion's share of customers today, when I look at web metrics across the different dealers, are looking for inventory online. Then when they call the dealership, they're looking for customer service. And if they don't get it, they go to the next dealership. Yeah. They're not even brand anymore. They're just like, listen, I want a car. Do you have it? Number 1. Number 2, do I even want to consider doing business with you? What's the experience when I call you? And I think that is probably permeating from Amazon and from Zappos and from Tesla and from other brands, Apple. And all these other brands who are basically saying, listen, number one, it's the customer. I mean, Amazon Bezos didn't become a multi-gazillionaire by accident. For him, it's about the customer. It may not be perfect, but if you take care of the customer, even if your product isn't perfect, you got a better chance of retaining them and selling them something. And I think dealers really need to figure that out. Yeah, technology needs to be part of it. You need to have a website that's state-of-the-art, that's forward-thinking, that's moving forward, that works for the customer, that's easy to use, that makes it easy for them. AI, I think, will be part of that. Conversational AI is coming. So I think you'll see that within the next 8 to 12 months, maybe 18 months from Google or whoever else. So that'll help handle your after hours. But invest in frontline staff and train them to handle customers, because if your competition isn't doing that, you're going to steal that customer. Like, I guarantee you will.
Yeah, Ian, that's the thing, man. Like I say this to my dealers all the time. It's like, listen, guys, these are the little things that differentiate yourselves from the rest that make all the difference in the world. Because if the customer, like to your point, if they call and they call and they call and they call and they get these automated machines, it's very difficult for them to connect with a human being. But they call your dealership and the first interaction they have is with a human being. I mean, that just, it speaks volumes.
Well, it'll shock them. They'll be like, wow, you got a person there?
Right.
Okay, what else do you have there that these other guys don't have?
Exactly.
Like someone to help me, maybe?
Yeah. So it's just, and we can still do those things now. The future, who knows? But now it's still easy for us to differentiate ourselves, because it's those little things that nobody really thinks about or implements that make all the difference in the world. So
100%. I mean, if you call your cell phone provider, and we know how much everyone loves their cell phone providers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the worst job in the universe, is to be on the call center cell phone providers who scream about bills every day. But anyway, or credit card company, right? They still have a person that can help you. Like, they still have a person there. But I'm selling you call it $25 to $75 or $100,000 car. I've got to deal with what I deal with the IRS before I can talk to a person about a $100,000 car. But my cell phone, I can scream at some guy or gal ad infinitum.
Yeah.
I mean, I might have to wait 5 minutes, but I get to talk to a person, right? Like, what are we talking about here? Like that. And realistically, it's probably a better comparison, because that millennials conditioned to this. So they're conditioned to a monthly bill. If you provide a better level of customer service than their cell phone provider, for example, or the hardware provider, Apple or Samsung or whatever, or Tesla, you're going to retain that customer, because if they're going to then measure that other company against that. So if I call 50 dealers today and one of them answers the phone, and the other ones, I get lost in some voicemail quandary and they hang up on me. I mean, I guarantee you the one that answered the phone's got a much higher chance of me becoming a customer, because
absolutely.
I don't have a lot of time. Like, I want to, do you have it? It's COVID. I want to come buy it. I'm not going to just go there. It's not like people come into dealerships the way they used to. And I don't think that's going to change. I think people are going to, after 24 months, they're going to say, okay, I don't want to come to the dealership. I'm going to call them first, or send them an email or a text or whatever. Do you have the car, dude?
Right.
I'm not coming in and spending 5 hours to get beat up. Like, I learned from that 18 to 24 months, I no longer have to do that. I can lob stuff at you from across the town, right? I mean, or even across the country. Like, I can buy a car in Washington State. I could buy a car in Toronto. I could buy a car in New York City. They'll ship me that car. I don't have to go there.
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
dude, this has been awesome, Ian. I really, really appreciate you doing this. It's been a lot of fun for me. We're getting real close to that time. There is one question that I ask everybody that comes on the show. But before, I wanted to give you 3 minutes to tell us how we can get in touch with you. What do you got going on? Tell us about your show. I'm gonna put links in the show notes, folks. So make sure to go in there and check it out. And reach out to Ian and connect with him if you want to, kind of extend this conversation.
Yeah, we're always looking for guest speakers. So if you want to be a speaker on the Auto Hub show, there is no cost. So just so you know, I mean, we're always looking for sponsors for shows or seasons, but there's no cost. Auto Hub show is every Monday for the most part at 11 o'clock East on Zoom. You can check out autohubshow.com. And that's where you get all the information. You can look me up on LinkedIn. It's Ian Nethercott. There's probably not a lot of us, especially ones that have a podcast. It's very few. And of course, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or I can help in any way. We do also have a section of our website for people looking for a job. So there's no cost to that either, but I've got a bunch of different headhunters on there. But if you have a deal group or you're a headhunter or you can help people find jobs or you're looking for a job, check it out. And if you want to get in touch with any of the speakers or watch past episodes, you can watch those episodes on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, on our website, or of course, look for it on LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live. I'm very active on LinkedIn and been on it for a long time. So, you're probably more likely to find me there, but I do have a Facebook account, but LinkedIn is generally the go-to place. And that's about it, really.
Right on. Make sure to connect with Ian. Check out the show. Please check out his show. Make sure you guys go in there and subscribe. And, the ones that have been on my show with me for these whole 6 seasons know that I'm big on education, and that's why I started the podcast myself. And the more we can connect with these platforms and utilize these channels, I think it's huge for our industry. All righty, sir. There is one question that I ask everybody that comes on the show.
Oh, don't forget to connect to Jeff Polo. He's my partner in crime. He's not here.
Right on. Yeah, make sure. Again, go to the show notes. We're going to link everybody in there. All right, so there is one question that I ask everybody that comes on the show, and that question is, where do you see the automotive industry headed in the next 5 years, and why?
I think the automotive industry is headed to a digital model in terms of people configuring and buying their cars online of one type or another. And I think what's also going to change is the way people own cars. I think it's only a question of time before people will have a shared ownership model, or they'll have use of their car for some other form of transportation, or possibly even they won't own the car at all. It'll be a monthly recurring revenue model. And the reason being, the price of cars is increasing, and how much time cars sit idle in a day all over the world just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think you'll always have those car aficionados who buy cars and want to own them. But I think the younger generation is going to want a different way to buy cars. They're going to want to own them in different ways. They may not want to own them at all. They may just want to have use of cars. And I think that's going to change the way dealers and manufacturers sell and get repeat business from customers. And if you saw what happened recently with Tesla and Hertz, that's basically, they're already going down that road with, well, I want to spend XYZ a month to have use of a car, be it a Tesla or whatever. And this is something that I think started with leasing and is continuing as we move into electric, just based on the cap cost of the car. I mean, spending $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 for an electric car the size of a Corolla, it seems to be crazy to me, but for that customer, it's not. And I think you've got to think outside the box to survive and thrive in automotive in these times. And I think that pace is only going to accelerate, just because I don't think people that are younger have that same attached value to a car as people in my generation might, or older.
Well, there you have it, folks. Right on. I really like the recurring model. I'm a believer in that. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and it's exciting to see what that's going to look like. So, especially if you can alternate vehicles, like that'd be super cool.
Well, have you seen what Porsche's doing?
Yeah, no, they started that a few years ago.
Yeah,
I believe, and they started in a couple. I think was it Atlanta or something like that? I remember reading about that in automotive news, and when I was working for Toyota, one of the distributors at Toyota, they had started that in the Texas region.
Because if I was a Porsche person, and let's just say I was spending $1,000 a month on a lease, I don't know. Let's just say that's what the number for me was. So if I could spend $1,200 a month for lease, and that included insurance, and I could switch it whenever I want, why would I not do that?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect
and maybe
sense.
It's even less. I don't know. I mean, I know Porsche does it, but I'm sure other manufacturers are looking at it. I know Genesis has got some interesting stuff around there as well. I mean, when you look at Genesis's model with basically services included and everything else, I mean, what's that number for you? If I'm someone who's used to spending $500 on a car and I own one car, for example, and I could have the option to switch my car for the same money, I mean, that's I think the kind of math that's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, folks, there you have it. Ian Nethercott, thank you so much again for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks to every one of you for tuning in. That's all the time that we have for today. And as usual, we'll talk later.
We only host a well-respected. The vendor LexisNexis. We don't sell digital marketing.
What you do?
We inspected with our DT vendor management solutions. We come in like the EPA to clear out the pollution.
Take the trash
Go
out.
keep your P&L clean. Your inventory lean.
Now more than ever, businesses need more efficient sales. That's why thousands of dealerships trust Foureyes to help with things like automated inventory email updates and ensuring all of your leads get into the CRM. To try Foureyes for free, visit foureyes.io/dealertalk. That's foureyes.io/dealertalk.